Greetings, everyone. So, there's been an alleged Eucharistic miracle. I don't know if you heard about this. An alleged Eucharistic miracle in the USA. A slightly different one to the kind of Eucharistic miracles we've had before. This one was similar to the feeding of the 5,000. In this particular case, the Eucharist has, again allegedly, because it hasn't been approved yet, duplicated itself. So this alleged miracle took place at the St. Thomas Catholic Church in Thomaston, and that's covered by the Archdiocese of Hartford. And what supposedly happened was that one of the people who was helping to give out the Eucharist in church, because you do sometimes have that where you have helpers who have been designated by the priest to give out the communion hosts, they noticed that in their ciborium, the communion hosts were running out, and they got a bit nervous, and they were concerned that they were going to run out completely because there were a lot of people still coming to get communion. And then as they were giving out the communion hosts, they just kept giving them out, and they didn't run out. Kind of like with the feeding of the 5,000, where you had a very limited amount of fish and bread, and it was being handed out, and they just kept handing it out, and it was multiplying. So here is the priest of that church, Father Joseph Crowley, talking about what happened at the end of the Mass on the 5th of March. That's when it took place.
We had something happen. It's hard to say, actually. It's God provides, and it's funny how God provides. And sometimes it comes in a weird way, in a mystical way, in a strange way. And one of our Eucharistic ministers was running out of hosts, and yet they didn't. And suddenly there was more hosts in the ciborium. Just God duplicated himself in the ciborium. It's God provides. It's strange how God does that. And it happened, and it was noted by one of our Eucharistic ministers that was giving out communion to you guys today. It's really, really cool when God does those things. And it's really, really cool when we realize what he's done. And it just happened today. Very powerful, very awesome, very real, very shocking, but also it happens. It happens, and today it happened. Where they were running out of hosts, and all of a sudden, more hosts just were there. So today, not only do we have the miracle of the Eucharist, we actually had a bigger miracle. It's pretty cool.
So he likes to say cool. That was very cool. A week later, that same priest, according to the person who uploaded this video, did a homily talking about this. So I'm assuming he's saying the following things that I'm about to show you in his homily, unless of course he said them maybe after the Mass or something, but according to the uploader of the video, he did say this during his sermon, during the homily. So here's a clip from a week later where the priest is once again talking about what happened at the Mass the week before.
I know there's been a lot of talk about what had happened last week, and I just want to kind of clarify, go through a couple things a little bit, just so it's not just hearsay or rumor or confusion, or just want to stick to the facts as to what had happened and kind of where we're going with it, the whole thing. First of all, I can't give all the little details because I don't want to. This is going to be investigated by the Archdiocese, and it is being investigated. For those who don't know or weren't here last week, and don't know what I'm talking about, I had given a ciboria to a Eucharistic minister, and it didn't have a whole lot of host apparently in it, which I had my thumb was all wrapped up. I couldn't give communion out, and it was kind of a bunch of decisions that were made very quickly as to me not giving communion out, and the individual was in an area, it took a spot that was very populated by you folks, and there wasn't enough host in the ciboria. And so as the individual was giving communion out, got a little nervous because they were running out of host, and began to look around to see. Our normal course of action is when you run out of host, you just go to the person next to your left or right, and you take some of the host and put them in your ciboria just to make sure the lines keep moving forward. And so that's the normal course of action. Of course, this individual was planning on that. We had plenty of hosts for the whole congregation. And as time went on, the hosts were being distributed, and then all of a sudden the individual looked down, and all of a sudden there's more hosts in the ciboria, and kept giving the host out. There's even more hosts in the ciboria, kept giving host out, and there's even more hosts in the ciboria. So by the time everyone received communion and came back up to the altar, there was the same amount, if not more, hosts that I gave the individual in the ciboria. And of course, the person gave out 100, 150 hosts to the people, in the congregation. So what happened is our Lord multiplied himself, is what happened. It really was a very cool miracle. There's no doubt. I have no doubt. I know what I gave the person. I know what returned, and it was very obvious and plain to me as to what happened. I also only had a minute to figure out what to say or to say anything. And so after I received the host, I had 1 minute literally to figure out whether to say something or not say something. And I'm glad I did. And what's funny is the individual afterwards, I'm like, I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't sure to say anything. And had said, Father, it wasn't for me and it wasn't for you, but it might have been for someone out in the pew or someone that was on film that needed to hear this. And it's true. I haven't been praying for anything like this. The individual hasn't been praying for anything like this. I've heard of this happening. I don't know of any person out of my 20 plus years of dealing with the church and dealing with the seminary, dealing with hundreds of priests, thousands of people, many bishops. I knew that the Lord can do anything. He does all things. For nothing is impossible for God. And but I never heard of anyone actually being able to pinpoint something as we were able to pinpoint something, pinpoint this particular situation. There's many times I've given communion out, and perhaps the Lord had done this before, where you just give communion out and all of a sudden there's plenty of hosts and you just keep going. But to have it be made aware is part of the miracle. There's 1,000 circumstances that could have taken place, but those circumstances took place. And that way I was able to, in that 1 minute, figure out to say something, not say something. In 1 minute, I was able to say, you know what, there's nothing telling me not to repeat this. So I'm going to repeat it. And that's kind of what happened. And I think our Lord gave us one of the best moments of reflection for this Lent about himself, about the Eucharist. What we do here every day in Mass is not, this isn't like a play. This isn't it's a liturgy. It's the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ that takes place right here on the altar every day. That's the real miracle, is the fact that we're able to take simple bread and wine, and through the prayers of the church, through the hands of the priest, Christ is made present through transubstantiation, where our Lord then becomes the flesh and blood hidden under the mere presence of bread and wine. And that's what our church teaches. That's the source and summit of our faith, is the Eucharist. Without the Eucharist, we have no faith. We have no meaning of the church, no purpose of the church. And so this was one of those moments where God showed up in a very powerful, powerful way. Here. Pretty cool.
So a very interesting case. Father Joseph did say there that this whole thing is currently being investigated by the diocese. It's going to be a tricky one to investigate, because unlike some of the previous Eucharistic miracles where, for example, the host was bleeding, it was then taken to a laboratory, tested, and then they found that it was human blood and that the communion host was actually muscle tissue, heart muscle tissue, and they could confirm exactly what was going on, practically kind of with laboratory testing. Whereas here, I suppose the investigation is going to involve talking to witnesses. They're going to talk to the person who said this happened, who was giving out the communion hosts. They might talk to the priest. They might talk to maybe some parishioners who were nearby, who were waiting to get communion. Maybe they saw that the person giving it out was kind of nervous, and they can testify to some of the things that have been said. I mean, one of the theories could be that perhaps the person who was giving out the communion thought that they were running out because they had a quick look into the ciborium and it looked like they were running out, but actually it was a bit deeper than they realized, and there were far more communion hosts than they realized. Although the priest did say in that second clip that he knows what he gave to this person. So he almost kind of like knows more or less how many communion hosts were in the ciborium. And so it would make sense that they were running out, because perhaps just a lot more people turned up in that area to take communion. And indeed, the person who was giving them out did run out. So, yeah, I mean, it's exciting, and it's very plausible. I believe it's possible that it can happen. Let's see what happens with the investigation. What do you think, folks? Do you think that this is something that probably has happened, or do you think maybe that there was some confusion and maybe, the person thought they were running out of the communion host, but actually they had enough, they just didn't realize, and then they thought in their mind that somehow they'd multiplied? Give me your thoughts in the comments below. Either way, it's an interesting story. I'll put a link in the description to an article you can read about it as well. And let me know what you think.